Hi guys, welcome back to Storytime with Miss Porter, and today we are going to read starting with chapter 15, and we're going to continue with our book Louisiana's Way Home. Chapter 15. Dear Louisiana, I read, "You must be brave." Well, that first sentence made me mad. I was tired of being brave, just like I was tired of imposing and persevering. But I went on reading. I am going to tell you some things you must know, that perhaps you should have known all along. I could feel my heart sink all the way down to my toes. I knew it. I knew that this was a letter of goodbye. I could tell. It was almost more than I could bear. But I had to bear it, didn't I? What choice did I have? I read on. I know that you know the story of the curse, but what I have never told you is that I saw my father that night, the night that he sawed my mother in half and walked away without putting her back together again. I was standing at the window of the hotel room. I was waiting for the two of them to return from the theater. I was up late, later than I should have been. I looked out the window of the hotel room, and I saw my father walking down the street toward the hotel. He was alone. His magician's cloak was floating out behind him, and I knew suddenly that he was going to tell me something important, but I did not know what it was. I could not imagine, you see, I could not imagine. My father stopped and looked up at the window of the hotel. I waved at him. He looked at me, and then he turned and walked away without saying anything to me at all. And that moment, when my father left without telling me anything, is the moment when the curse truly began. That was the true moment of sundering. I closed my eyes. I could see small Granny, young Granny, standing at the window of the hotel room watching her father turn and walk away from her. It made my heart hurt. Poor Granny. At least she had all her teeth then. I read on. In these last few days my father has appeared to me again and again. In Florida, I woke up from a dream of him calling my name, speaking to me at last, and I knew then that we must go to Elf Ear immediately. That is why we left in such haste, Louisiana. I felt as if I was being summoned, and now every time I close my eyes I see him, my father. He appears out of the fog of my mind, and he calls my name, and his tone is ominous. It has become clear to me what I must do. I must go and confront the curse. I must do it alone. Was it a good idea for a toothless, feverish Granny to go and confront the curse by herself, without me? Well, I did not think so. But then, Granny wasn't soliciting my opinion, was she? I don't know what I will find in Elf Ear, Louisiana. I don't know what darkness awaits me, but I know that I must keep you safe from it. I wish that I could say goodbye to you in person, but I fear that you would insist on coming with me. Worse, I fear that I would not have the courage to go. And I must go. Oh, I do not want to leave you as my father left me. I want you to know that you are loved. I want to tell you the truth of who you are. Brace yourself, Louisiana. I looked up. I stared at the palm tree curtains and the dark world outside. I braced myself. Your parents were never known to me. What? I said out loud. I looked around room 102. What are you talking about, Granny? Of course my parents were known to you. My parents were the Flying Elefantes. They were famous far and wide. They were beautiful and talented. You have told me so many times. You and I are not related at all, Louisiana. You were tossed together by the winds of fate. Your parents were not the Flying Elefantes. They were not trapeze artists. I do not know who your parents were. That is a mystery. I will not be able to unravel for you. Something large and dark had entered room 102 of the Goodnight Sleep Tight, and the large, dark thing was sitting right on top of my chest. I could not breathe. If my parents were not the Flying Elefantes, then who was I? Read on, whispered the dark thing on my chest. Read on. After the curse befell me, I was sent to the county home. And after the county home, after I survived that miserable place, I entered the world as an adult. I moved through it as a solitary being, and I did not mind at all. I was glad to be alone. Yes, glad. For if you are alone, then you do not need to worry about the curse of sundering. I had a certain musical gift when I was very young. My mother had taught me to play the piano, and so that is what I did. I played the piano at churches. I gave recitals and lessons. And I worked at other jobs, small jobs, clerking, typing, cashiering. I got by. Listen, Louisiana, listen. Now we come to you. When I lived in New Orleans, I worked for a time at the Louisiana Five and Dime. I sat up straight. The dark thing on my chest sat up straight, too, but it did not go away from me. One evening I walked out into the alley and I heard the whimper of a small animal. I knew what was coming. Read, the dark thing said. Read. I read. It was you, Louisiana. You were impossibly small. You were wrapped in a flowered blanket. Someone had put you on top of a pile of cardboard boxes and left you there. Understand, I had never wanted a child. I had no need to rescue anyone. But I picked you up, and you smiled at me. You smiled, Louisiana. I knew what it meant to be abandoned, left behind. I knew, too, what would happen if I notified the authorities. I knew that you would go to the orphanage, to a county home. I could not let that happen. So this is the truth. These are the facts. I picked you up. You smiled at me. I named you for where you were found, and caring for you has been the greatest joy in my life. I was named after a five and dime? I was not an elefante? Someone had left me in an alley? I couldn't breathe. I would give anything to stay here with you. But the curse will not be denied. See how it is, even now, doing its dark work and pulling us apart? Please understand, I am old, and I am very unwell, and I fear there is little time left for me. My father will not stop calling my name. I must go and face the curse. I will try to return, but in case something prevents me, in case my time is too short, I want to tell you this. Do not come after me. The curse is too dangerous. I wish that I had time to see you to safety, but you are wily, resilient. You are not alone in the world. You will find a way. And please remember this. Someone put you down in that alley, but I picked you up, and perhaps what matters, when all is said and done, is not who puts us down, but who picks us up. I have loved you with the whole of myself, Louisiana. You will always and forever be loved by me. I have gone to Elf Ear to set us both free. Do not forget that you can sing. I love you. Chapter 16. Get off me, I said to the dark thing on my chest. Please get off me. But it did not move. I stood up. I kept hold of the letter. I picked up the bologna sandwiches, and I staggered out of room 102. I went into the office of the Good Night Sleep Tight, because I did not know where else to go. Bernice was behind the counter. A tragedy was occurring. The darkness had descended, and Granny was gone. But Bernice's hair was still in curlers. Here is something I have learned. You should never expect help from someone who perpetually has their hair in curlers. But what was I to do? Where could I turn? I didn't even know who I was. Good evening, I said to Bernice. What now? Said Bernice. I guessed that it was just impossible for her to be a friendly person, no matter how hard she tried. Not that she was trying. I am wondering if you have seen my granny recently, and if she gave you any information, I said. Seen your granny, said Bernice. What information? Don't tell me your granny is missing. She is not missing, I said. Then why are you looking for her? Said Bernice. She narrowed her eyes. I narrowed my eyes back at her, but the dark thing was still on my chest, and it was very hard for me to breathe. I turned away from Bernice. I bent over and put my hands on my knees. I closed my eyes and concentrated on breathing. Who am I? Who am I? That was the question my heart kept beating out. When I opened my eyes, I saw the alligator staring at me. He was an incredibly ferocious-looking alligator, but he also seemed perplexed, as if he were thinking. How in the world did a dangerous man-eating alligator like me end up dead in the office of the Good Night Sleep Tight motel? There is something very sad about the contemplating a perplexed stuffed alligator when it is dark outside and you do not know who you are or who your parents were or anything about yourself at all. What are you doing? Said Bernice. Well, yes, that was the question, wasn't it? I am communing with the alligator, I said. Oh, Bernice, said Bernice. You're communing with the alligator? Of course you are. I suppose next you'll be speaking with the vending machine. And that reminds me. Let me tell you something about Burke Allen and that vending machine. He makes little quarter-shaped pieces of metal down at that machine shop of his father's, and then he puts the metal into the vending machine and takes what he wants without paying for a thing. That is theft. That is a crime. Burke Allen, who gave me 2 sandwiches when I had only asked for 1. Burke Allen, who had a crow named Clarence. I could feel the dark thing on top of me lifting up, peeling away. Burke Allen would help me. Burke Allen would know what to do. I stood up straight. I turned around and faced Bernice. Thank you very much, I said. even though she had not helped me with anything at all. Be polite up to the last minute. Be polite until they absolutely force you not to be. That was what the woman named Granny always advised. I left the good night sleep tight office and I did not look back. Chapter 17. How hard could it be to find a pink house in the woods? Well, it turned out to be harder than I expected. To begin with, it was dark and I could not see where I was going, and there were trees everywhere, and tall grass and mean bushes. Also, it was unnecessarily windy. Something was flying over my head, and I did not think it was a bird. Under the best of circumstances, I have never been able to tell one direction from another, and these were not the best of circumstances. I kept hoping that Clarence would appear and lead me to the pink house and to Burke Allen. In the story of Pinocchio, Pinocchio is lost and walking through the woods, and a blind cat and a lame fox come along and tell him a lot of lies. I made up my mind that I was not going to listen to anyone who told me lies. Of course, thinking about lies made me think about Granny. That is, I thought about the woman who I had once believed to be my granny, even though she was absolutely no relation of mine. I can tell you one thing, whoever she was certainly a big old liar. I was never ever going to speak to her again, and I hoped that she remained toothless until the end of time. Oh, I was mad. And also I was lost, and then I fell into a hole. It was not a deep hole, and that was fortunate, but it was deep enough to make me lose my balance and fall to the ground and drop the letter and bologna sandwiches. I stood up. My ankle hurt. So I went back down on my hands and knees, and I crawled around in the dark woods looking for the letter and the sandwiches, and because it was dark, it was hard to find anything. And my goodness, I was lonely. I almost wished that a blind cat and a lame fox would show up, even if they were just going to tell me lies. It would be nice to have some company. I crawled around some more and found both bologna sandwiches. That was a good thing. But I could not find the letter. The wind had taken it away. It was gone, gone, gone. Just like Granny, I started to cry. I cried and cried, but since who knew what was going to happen next, I certainly had no idea, and since it seemed like a good idea to keep my strength up in such a dark and windy world, I ate one bologna sandwich and then I ate the other. I cried the whole time I ate them. Both sandwiches were very good. Imagine Granny lying to me about bologna. She should have put something in her letter apologizing for all the lies she had told me, including the lies about bologna. And then I remembered that Granny was not my granny, and that I had lost the letter informing me of that fact. I stood up, but it still hurt to stand on my ankle, so I went back down on my hands and knees, and I crawled over the ground looking for the stupid letter. I started to cry harder and louder. It was very hard to breathe, and everything smelled like bologna and a little bit like orange cheese. The world was so dark. I don't know that I had ever before encountered such darkness. So you can imagine how surprised I was when a bright light shone out of the darkness, and a voice said, "What in the Sam Hill?" I stared into the light, and I said, "I am looking for a letter in a pink house and a boy named Burke Allen." And then I fainted. The next thing I remember is being carried. I smelled something sweet. I said, "What is that smell?" A man's voice answered me. He said, "That's cake, darling." I liked that answer very much. I think that cake is a very good word in general, and that people should use it as an answer to questions more often. Darling is a nice word too. The cake smell got stronger and sweeter, and then I saw the pink house, and I was so happy that I must have passed out again, just from sheer joy. Chapter 18. When I opened my eyes, I was on a red-flowered couch, and 3 faces were looking down at me. One of the faces belonged to Burke Allen. "She ain't no bigger than a minute," said a man with very short gray hair. "Her name is Louisiana Elefante," said Burke, "and her mama and daddy was trapeze artists." "I thought she was some kind of wounded animal," said the third person. He looked just like Burke, except older. His hair was blonde, too, and cut just the same as Burke's and the old man's. "I thought maybe she was a bobcat," said the blonde man, who was surely Burke's father. "She was wailing like a bobcat." "There ain't no more bobcats in them woods," said the gray-haired man. "I know that, Daddy," said Burke's father. "I'm saying that's what she sounded like." "Well, she ain't no bigger than a minute." "You already said that, Grandpap," said Burke. "I'm saying it again, ain't I?" "You are all Burke Allens," I said, because it was just now making sense to me. One Burke Allen was the father, and the other Burke Allen was the grandfather, and the final Burke Allen was my Burke Allen. Burke looked down at me and smiled. "Hey, Louisiana," he said. I stuck my hand up and waved at him. "Hey," said Burke again, "how do you feel?" "I feel strange," I said. "Maybe it's that old curse," said Burke. "What curse?" said the grandfather. "There's a curse upon her head," said Burke. "Now, son," said Burke's father, "don't go making things up." "I ain't making it up," said Burke. "She told it all to me." "Where is Clarence?" I said. No one answered me. The cake smell was very strong. The couch was floured. Did I say that already? My ankle hurt, but not much. I felt like I was floating on a floured, cake-scented cloud. Maybe I was in heaven. Granny didn't believe in heaven, but that didn't mean I had to not believe, did it? Maybe I came from a long line of believers. Who could say? In any case, the cake smelled very, very good. "What kind of cake is that I smell?" I said to Burke. And then there was a woman coming toward us. She had big blonde hair. She was smiling at me. She didn't look a thing like the Blue Fairy, but she smiled the same way the Blue Fairy smiled. She was wiping her hands on a striped dish towel. She said, "Honey, that is my famous chocolate cake." Burke said, "Mama is making 17 cakes." "17?" I said. "17," she said. 17 cakes. The room spun around. "Burke," I said, "I don't know who I am." "Well, you're Louisiana," he said. "Did she hit her head?" said his mother. "There's a letter," I said. I tried to sit up, but I felt dizzy, and I immediately lay back down. "The letter explains everything. Actually, it doesn't explain anything at all, and besides, the letter is gone, blown by the wind into the lands of no return." "How's that?" said the grandfather. "The lands of what?" "We'll find it," said Burke. "I don't want to see that letter ever again," I said. I started to cry. "She's crying," said Burke. "I see that, son," said Burke's father. "Hey, now," said the grandfather. He took hold of my hand, and his hand was so rough and calloused and oversized that it was like holding on to a horse hoof. I cried harder. I had never held hands with a horse before. "Thought she was a bobcat," said Burke's father. "No bigger than a minute," said the grandfather. He squeezed my hand with his horse hoof. It hurt, but it was comforting too. "Burke," I said, "Granny is gone." "Gone?" said Burke. "Gone," I said. The world smelled so sweet. I thought I would just close my eyes. Now that you've heard chapters 15 through 18, this is what I want you to write about in the discussion post below. So in Granny's letter, she writes, "Please remember this. Someone put you down in that alley, but I picked you up. And perhaps what matters when all is said and done is not who puts us down, but who picks us up." What does Granny mean by that? And do you agree with her?